Staff Sergeant Leon Hayes watches through cracked binoculars as Brigadier General Howard Ashford, the man who designed the M7 howitzer that saved thousands of American lives, leans over a drafting table beside a German officer and points to weapon schematics with his own pencil. The general's voice carries through the factory floor, calm and professional, explaining how to reinforce the barrel housing on an 80mm anti-aircraft gun. Hayes lowers the binoculars, his breath forming white clouds in the frozen air, and turns to his squad crouched in the snow behind him. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Every man saw what he saw. The most decorated engineer in the United States Army is teaching the enemy how to kill Americans more efficiently. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The Vosges Mountains in December 1944 are not a place for the living. Snow covers everything, thick and heavy muffling sound, until the world feels wrapped in cotton. The trees stand bare, their branches coated in ice that cracks and falls with every gust of wind. Visibility drops to nothing when the fog rolls in, which it does most mornings, turning the forest into a maze of grey shapes and shadows. The cold cuts through wool, through leather, through skin. It settles into bones and stays there. Staff Sergeant Leon Hayes has been in these mountains for 3 weeks. He's 26 years old, from Detroit, and before the war he worked in his father's auto repair shop. He knows engines, knows how things fit together, how to spot when something's wrong just by listening to the sound it makes. That skill translated well to the infantry. He can hear a German convoy moving through the valley 2 miles away just by the pitch of the diesel engines. He can tell the difference between a Mauser and a Kar 98K by the crack of the rifle shot echoing through the trees. His squad is 8 men strong, 7 now, since they lost Private Dixon to a sniper 4 days ago. They're part of the 761st Tank Battalion's support infantry, though they haven't seen a tank in over a week. The brass keeps them moving, keeps them patrolling, keeps them away from the main fighting. They're good soldiers. They follow orders. They don't ask why they're always the ones sent into the deepest parts of enemy territory, with outdated maps and ammunition that sometimes doesn't match their rifles. The mission today was supposed to be simple: recon patrol. Move through the forest, check for enemy movement, report back. Standard procedure. The kind of thing Hayes has done 100 times. Except this time, 2 hours into the patrol, Corporal Vincent Reeves spotted something that didn't belong. A set of tire tracks in the snow, fresh enough that they hadn't frozen over yet. Wide tracks, heavy vehicles, moving east, deeper into German-held territory. Hayes made the call to follow them. Against orders, technically, but he's learned that sometimes you have to trust your gut. The tracks led them through a narrow valley, between 2 ridges thick with pine trees. The snow got deeper, the air got colder, and then, just as the sun started to dip below the western ridge, they found it. A clearing. Hidden so well that if you weren't looking for it, you'd walk right past. The trees on the perimeter had been cut down but left standing, propped up by supports to create a natural-looking wall. Behind that wall, dug into the hillside itself, was a concrete bunker entrance. Camouflage netting covered most of it, white and grey to match the snow and stone. 2 guards stood outside, their breath visible in the cold, rifles slung over their shoulders. They looked bored. They weren't expecting company. Hayes signaled his men to spread out. They moved without sound, ghosts in the snow. Reeves took position on the left flank. Private Eddie Lawson moved right. Sergeant Tom Bishop, the squad's oldest member at 34, stayed close to Hayes. The rest fanned out behind them, creating a loose perimeter. The guards died quietly. 2 shots, muffled by the snow and the wind. Hayes didn't like killing men who weren't looking at him, but war doesn't offer the luxury of fair fights. The bodies were dragged into the trees. The squad moved forward. The bunker entrance was reinforced steel, painted white to match the concrete. A heavy door, the kind that could withstand artillery. It was open. Warm air drifted out, carrying the smell of oil and metal and something else. Cordite. Explosives. Hayes felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't a supply depot or a command post. This was something else. They moved inside. A tunnel sloped downward, lit by electric bulbs strung along the ceiling. The walls were rough-cut stone, the floor poured concrete. Professional work. This place had been here for months, maybe longer. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and that's when Hayes realized what they'd found. A weapons factory. Underground, carved out of the mountain itself. The main floor stretched 50 yards in every direction, the ceiling supported by steel beams and concrete pillars. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in tools and parts and half-assembled weapons. There were lathes, drill presses, welding stations, crates stacked against the far wall marked with German military codes, and in the center of it all, a massive assembly line where workers in grey coveralls moved between stations, their hands moving with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this work for months. But it was the people overseeing the work that made Hayes stop cold. German officers, 3 of them, standing near the main assembly line. And beside them, leaning over a drafting table with blueprints spread across its surface, was a man in an American uniform. The rank insignia on his shoulders was unmistakable. Brigadier General, 1 star. Hayes recognized him immediately. Every soldier in the European theater knew that face. Brigadier General Howard Ashford, the genius engineer, the man who'd revolutionized American artillery design, the man who'd personally overseen the development of the weapon systems that had helped Allied forces break through the Siegfried Line. His face had been in stars and stripes a dozen times. He'd been decorated by Eisenhower himself, and now he was here, in an enemy weapons factory, deep in German-held territory, giving instructions to German officers. Hayes dropped to one knee behind a stack of crates, his rifle pressed against his shoulder. His squad followed his lead, spreading out along the perimeter of the chamber, hidden in the shadows between the electric lights. They were too far away to hear what was being said, but Hayes could see it clearly. Ashford pointing to the blueprints, the German officers nodding, one of them making notes on a clipboard. Bishop crawled up beside Hayes. His voice was barely a whisper. "Sergeant, that's... I know. What do we do?" Hayes didn't answer. He was watching Ashford move around the table, his hands gesturing as he explained something. The general looked comfortable. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't being held at gunpoint. He was working, collaborating. Reeves joined them, his face pale even in the dim light. "Tell me I'm seeing things." Hayes shook his head slowly. "You're not." "Then what the hell is a 1-star general doing in a German factory? That's what we're going to find out." Hayes pulled out his binoculars, focusing on the drafting table. The blueprints were too far away to read, but he could see the general's lips moving as he spoke. The German officer beside him, a major by the insignia on his collar, was listening intently. Ashford picked up a pencil and made a mark on the blueprint, then tapped it twice for emphasis. The major nodded. He said something Hayes couldn't hear. Ashford responded, and even from this distance, Hayes could see the easy confidence in his body language. This wasn't a prisoner forced to work. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing and was doing it willingly. Bishop's hand tightened on his rifle. "We need to call this in." "Radio's back at base. We're 20 miles behind enemy lines. Then we pull back. Report it when we get back." Hayes considered that. It was the smart play, the safe play. Follow protocol. Let command make the decision. But something in his gut told him that if they left now, this opportunity wouldn't come again. Ashford would disappear. The factory would be moved, and whatever was happening here would continue. He looked at his men, 7 faces, all watching him, waiting for orders. They'd followed him through hell and back. They trusted him. And now he had to decide whether to follow the rules or follow his instincts. Ashford straightened up from the table, stretching his back. He said something to the German major that made the other man smile. Then he turned and walked toward the far end of the factory floor, disappearing through a doorway into what looked like an office area. Hayes made his decision. "We take him." Bishop stared at him. "Take him. Sergeant, he's a general. He's also a traitor, and if we don't stop him now, he's going to help the Germans kill more of our men. This isn't our call to make." "Then whose call is it? Command? They'll want proof. They'll want evidence. And by the time we get back here with authorization, he'll be gone." Hayes looked at each man in turn. "We do this quiet. We get him out of here. We bring him back to base. Let the brass figure out the rest." Lawson spoke up from the right flank. "What if he doesn't want to come quiet?" Hayes didn't answer that. He didn't need to. They all knew what the alternative was. Reeves, Bishop, you're with me. The rest of you hold this position. Anyone comes through that entrance behind us, you put them down. Quiet as possible. The men nodded. Hayes checked his rifle one more time, then moved forward, staying low, using the crates and machinery as cover. The factory floor was noisy enough that their footsteps were masked by the sound of metal on metal, the hiss of welding torches, the low hum of electric motors. The workers were focused on their tasks, heads down, hands moving. None of them looked up. Hayes reached the doorway Ashford had disappeared through. It led to a narrow corridor, concrete walls, more electric lights. He could hear voices coming from a room at the end of the hall, English and German, alternating. He moved forward, Bishop and Reeves close behind him. The room at the end of the corridor was an office, desk, filing cabinets, a single window that looked out over the factory floor. And sitting behind the desk, still wearing his American uniform, was Brigadier General Howard Ashford. He looked up when Hayes entered. For a moment their eyes met. Ashford's expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look afraid. He just looked tired. "Sergeant," Ashford said quietly, "I was wondering when someone would finally show up." Hayes keeps his rifle pointed at Ashford's chest. The general doesn't move. He sits perfectly still behind the desk, his hands visible on the wooden surface, palms down. No weapon, no sudden movements, just waiting. "Stand up," Hayes says. His voice is steady, but his heart is hammering against his ribs. Slowly, Ashford complies. He rises from the chair with the careful movements of a man who knows how quickly situations like this can turn fatal. He's tall, maybe 6'2", with grey hair cut military short. His uniform is clean, pressed, the creases sharp. The single star on his shoulder catches the light from the overhead bulb. Bishop moves to the window, checking the factory floor below. Reeves stays by the door, his rifle covering the hallway. Hayes steps forward, closing the distance between himself and the general. "Hands behind your head." "Sergeant, I need you to listen to me." "Hands behind your head, now." Ashford's jaw tightens, but he follows the order. His fingers lace together behind his skull. Hayes moves around the desk, keeping the rifle trained on center mass. He pats Ashford down quickly, professionally. No sidearm, no knife, nothing in the pockets except a pen and a folded handkerchief. "Turn around." Ashford turns. Hayes pulls a length of rope from his belt, the same rope they use to secure prisoners in the field. He begins binding the general's wrists, pulling the knots tight but not brutal. As he works, Ashford speaks again. "How many men do you have?" Hayes doesn't answer. 7, 8, however many it is, it's not enough. There are 40 Germans in this facility, 42 if you count the guards you killed at the entrance. Then we'll have to move fast. You won't make it out of here alive. That's my problem, not yours. Hayes finishes with the rope and steps back. Ashford flexes his fingers, testing the bonds. He doesn't struggle. He just looks at Hayes with an expression that's hard to read. Not quite resignation, not quite relief, something in between. "What's your name, Sergeant?" "Hayes." "First name?" "That's all you need to know." "Fair enough." Ashford glances at Bishop, then at Reeves. "Your men look like they've been out here for a while. When's the last time you rotated back to base?" 3 weeks. Long patrol. Long war." Ashford nods slowly. He looks around the office, at the filing cabinets, at the desk covered in papers and blueprints. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter. "I suppose you have questions." "I've got one question. Why? Why am I here? Why are you helping them kill Americans?" The directness of it makes Ashford flinch. For the first time since Hayes entered the room, something shows on the general's face. Not guilt, exactly. More like exhaustion. The kind that goes deeper than lack of sleep. "It's not that simple." "Looks pretty simple from where I'm standing. You're in an enemy factory. You're teaching Germans how to build better weapons. That's called treason." "It's called survival." Hayes feels Bishop shift beside him. Reeves makes a low sound in his throat, something between anger and disbelief. Hayes keeps his eyes on Ashford. "Explain." "I can't. Not here. Not now. But if you get me out of here, if you get me back to Allied lines, I'll tell you everything. I'll answer every question. I'll give you names, dates, locations, everything. Why should I believe you? Because if I wanted you dead, Sergeant, you'd already be dead. The words hang in the air like smoke. Hayes feels the temperature in the room drop. Ashford sees the recognition in his eyes and continues. You think this factory is hidden because of luck. You think those guards outside were the only security. The only reason you made it this far is because I ordered them to let you through. Bullshit. Is it? You followed tire tracks for 2 hours. Fresh tracks, clear as day, leading you straight here. You found an entrance with only 2 guards. You walked into a facility with 40 armed Germans and not one of them saw you. Ashford's voice is calm, measured. I've been waiting for someone to find this place. I've been leaving breadcrumbs for 3 weeks. You're the first ones who followed them. Hayes feels something cold settle in his stomach. He looks at Bishop, who's staring at Ashford with narrowed eyes. Reeves has gone pale. You're saying you wanted to be found. I'm saying I needed to be found. There's a difference. Why not just walk out? Why not escape? Because they're watching me. Because the moment I try to leave, I'm dead. Because the only way I get out of here alive is if American soldiers extract me by force. Ashford takes a breath. So yes, Sergeant Hayes, I set a trap, and you walked into it. The only question now is whether you're smart enough to spring it. Bishop moves closer to Hayes, his voice low. This could be bullshit. He could be playing us. Could be. Or he could be telling the truth. Could be that, too. Hayes studies Ashford's face. The general doesn't look like a liar, but then again, good liars never do. The problem is nothing about this adds up. A 1-star general in the middle of enemy territory, working in a weapons factory, claiming he wants to be rescued. It's either the truth or the most elaborate trap Hayes has ever seen. What's in those filing cabinets? Ashford glances at them. Production schedules, material shipments, personnel records. German personnel. Some. Others. What others? Ashford hesitates. For the first time, Hayes sees something that might be fear cross the general's face. You need to see for yourself. Hayes keeps his rifle trained on Ashford and moves to the nearest filing cabinet. He pulls it open with one hand. Inside are rows of folders, each one labeled with a name and a number. He pulls one out at random, opens it. What he sees makes his breath catch. The folder contains a photograph. An American soldier, captain's bars visible on his collar. Beneath the photo is a typed report in English, detailing the captain's service record. Unit served with, battles fought, decorations earned. And at the bottom, in red ink, a single word stamped across the page. Eliminated. Hayes pulls out another folder. Another American, another report, another red stamp. He goes through 5 more. All Americans. All eliminated. What the hell is this? Ashford's voice is flat, emotionless. A kill list. For who? For everyone who knows what's really happening here. Hayes feels his hands start to shake. He closes the folder and turns back to Ashford. How many? 243, last time I counted. 243 Americans? Officers, engineers, scientists, anyone with knowledge of certain weapons programs, anyone who could compromise what they're building here. Ashford meets Hayes's eyes. I'm number 87. The room goes silent. Outside, the factory continues its work, the sound of machinery drifting through the closed door. Hayes tries to process what he's hearing, but it's too big, too impossible. You're telling me there's a list of American officers marked for assassination. I'm telling you that this factory isn't producing weapons for the Germans. It's producing weapons for someone else. Someone who needs both sides to keep fighting. Someone who benefits from the war continuing. That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense if you follow the money. If you look at who's supplying the materials. If you trace where the finished products are actually going. Ashford's voice drops even lower. This isn't about Germany winning or America winning. This is about profit, and the people running this operation will kill anyone who threatens that profit. Bishop steps forward, his face hard. You expect us to believe there's some kind of conspiracy? That Americans are helping Germans build weapons to kill Americans, for money? I expect you to open your eyes. How do you think the Germans are still manufacturing advanced weapons, when every factory in the Ruhr Valley has been bombed to rubble? How do you think they're getting raw materials when every supply line has been cut? Someone's feeding them. Someone with resources. Someone with connections. Ashford looks at each of them in turn. And that someone wants me dead because I figured it out. Hayes feels his worldview tilting. Everything he thought he knew about this war, about command, about the mission, suddenly feels uncertain. He wants to dismiss Ashford's words as the ravings of a traitor trying to save his own skin, but the filing cabinets are real. The names in those folders are real. And the fear in Ashford's eyes when he talks about them is real too. Who's running it? I don't know all the names, I know some, not enough. Ashford nods toward the desk. But there are documents in that drawer, shipping manifests, bank records, coded communications, everything I've managed to copy over the past 3 weeks. Hayes moves to the desk, pulls open the drawer. Inside is a leather satchel, worn and heavy. He lifts it out, feeling the weight of papers inside. This is evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could change everything, or get them all killed. A sound from the hallway makes them all freeze. Footsteps, heavy boots on concrete coming closer. Reeves raises his rifle, positioning himself beside the door. The footsteps stop just outside. A voice calls out in German, sharp and commanding. Ashford responds in the same language, his accent flawless. Whatever he says seems to satisfy the voice, because the footsteps retreat, fading back down the corridor. Hayes lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. What did you tell him? That I was reviewing production schedules and didn't want to be disturbed. Ashford looks at the door. We don't have much time. That was Major Kessler. He'll be back in 10 minutes to check on me. When he finds me gone, this whole place will lock down. Then we move now. How many men do you have outside? 4. Against 40. Those are bad odds. I've had worse. Ashford almost smiles at that. I believe you have. He straightens his shoulders despite the rope binding his wrists. There's a service tunnel on the north side of the facility. It leads to a ventilation shaft that opens into the forest about half a mile from here. The Germans don't guard it because it's too narrow for vehicles, but men can fit through it. If we can reach that tunnel, we can get out without fighting through the main entrance. Hayes considers this. It's a better option than trying to shoot their way out the front, but it means trusting Ashford, trusting that the tunnel exists, trusting that it's not another trap. He looks at Bishop. The older sergeant gives him a slight nod. Your call. Hayes makes his decision. Show us. Hayes signals Reeves to take point. They move back into the corridor, Ashford between them, Bishop covering the rear. The factory floor beyond is still humming with activity, workers moving between stations, the clang of metal on metal echoing off the concrete walls. No one looks up. No one seems to notice anything wrong. Ashford keeps his voice low as they move. The tunnel entrance is past the assembly line, northwest corner. There's a maintenance door marked with a yellow triangle. How far to the exit? 1/4 mile through the tunnel, then another 1/4 mile through the ventilation shaft. The shaft is steep, 60-degree angle. You'll need to climb. Hayes absorbs this. A 1/4 mile underground with a general whose hands are tied, followed by a climb through a narrow shaft. All while 40 Germans are somewhere behind them. The odds keep getting worse. They reach the edge of the factory floor. Hayes scans the space, counting exits, counting workers, counting threats. Most of the Germans are focused on their tasks, but there are guards posted at intervals around the perimeter. 6 that he can see, probably more out of sight. We go fast and quiet. Stay behind the equipment, don't stop for anything. The squad moves as one. They learned this kind of movement in training, refined it in combat. Each man knows his position, knows his role. Reeves leads, finding the path of least exposure. Hayes keeps Ashford close, one hand on the general's shoulder guiding him. Bishop and the others fan out in a protective formation. They make it 20 yards before the first problem hits. A worker steps out from behind a lathe, carrying a metal component. He's young, maybe 19, wearing the grey coveralls of a factory labourer. He sees them immediately. His eyes go wide. The component slips from his hands and hits the concrete with a sharp clang that cuts through the background noise like a gunshot. For a frozen second, nobody moves. The worker stares. Hayes stares back. Then the kid opens his mouth to shout. Reeves is faster. He crosses the distance in 2 steps and drives his rifle butt into the worker's stomach. The shout becomes a wheeze. The kid doubles over. Reeves catches him before he hits the ground and drags him behind a stack of crates, but the damage is done. The clang of dropped metal echoed across the factory floor. Heads are turning. A guard near the far wall straightens up, his hand moving to his rifle. Another guard closer starts walking in their direction. Hayes makes a split decision. Move, now. They abandon stealth for speed. Hayes shoves Ashford forward, and the general runs despite his bound hands, his boots loud on the concrete. The squad breaks into a sprint. Behind them, someone shouts in German. Then another voice joins. Then a whistle blows, sharp and piercing. The factory erupts, workers scatter, guards reach for weapons. Hayes sees the yellow triangle on the maintenance door 30 yards ahead. Gunfire cracks behind them. Bullets spark off metal machinery. One round punches through a wooden crate to Hayes's left, spraying splinters. Reeves reaches the door first. He tries the handle. Locked. He steps back and fires twice at the mechanism. The lock explodes in a shower of metal fragments. He kicks the door open. Inside, go. Ashford plunges through. Hayes follows, then Bishop, then Lawson. The rest of the squad lays down covering fire, their rifles barking in controlled bursts. More Germans are pouring onto the factory floor now, taking positions behind machinery, returning fire. The last man through the door is Private Danny Cole. He's 10 feet away when a bullet catches him in the leg. He goes down hard, his rifle clattering across the floor. Hayes lunges back through the doorway, grabs Cole's collar, and drags him inside. Bullets hammer the doorframe, chewing through wood and concrete. Bishop slams the door shut. It won't hold long, but it doesn't need to. Hayes is already looking for something to bar it with. He finds a steel pipe leaning against the wall and jams it through the handle. It'll buy them maybe 30 seconds. Cole is on the ground, clutching his leg. Blood seeps between his fingers, dark and thick. Bishop drops beside him, pulling a field dressing from his pack. How bad? Through and through. Missed the bone. Can you walk? Cole grits his teeth. Can I crawl faster? Despite everything, Hayes almost smiles. Cole's been with the squad since North Africa. The kid doesn't quit. Bishop, get him mobile, everyone else on me. The tunnel stretches ahead of them, narrow and dark. A single row of electric bulbs provides dim light every 20 feet. The walls are rough stone, the floor uneven. Water drips somewhere in the distance, echoing weirdly in the confined space. Ashford is already moving, running awkwardly with his hands still bound. Hayes catches up to him. How many ways in and out of this tunnel? 2. The maintenance door we just came through and the ventilation shaft at the far end. No other exits? No. Then they'll come through behind us and wait for us at the top of the shaft. I know. You got a plan for that? I was hoping you would. Hayes curses under his breath. Behind them, something heavy slams into the maintenance door. Once, twice. The steel pipe holds, but it won't hold forever. The Germans are coming. The squad runs. Cole limps between Bishop and Lawson, his face pale but his jaw set. The tunnel slopes downward at first, then levels out. The air is cold and damp, thick with the smell of earth and stone. The electric bulbs cast long shadows that dance as they pass. They're 100 yards in when the maintenance door finally gives way. The sound of splintering wood echoes through the tunnel, followed by shouts in German. Hayes glances back and sees flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Faster. They push harder. Ashford's breathing is labored now, his face slick with sweat despite the cold. He's in good shape for a man his age, but he's not infantry. He's not built for this kind of exertion. Hayes can see him starting to flag. How much farther? Quarter mile, maybe less. A gunshot cracks behind them, deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. The bullet ricochets off stone, whining as it careens down the tunnel. Hayes doesn't look back. Looking back won't help. The tunnel begins to narrow. The ceiling drops lower, forcing them to hunch as they run. The electric bulbs become less frequent, the darkness between them deeper. Hayes can hear the Germans behind them, their boots pounding, their voices calling to each other. They're gaining. Ashford stumbles. Hayes catches him before he goes down, hauling him upright by the arm. Keep moving. I can't. You can. You will. Something in Hayes's voice must reach through the exhaustion, because Ashford nods and keeps running. They round a bend in the tunnel, and suddenly the electric lights end. Ahead is only darkness, broken by a faint grey glow from somewhere far above. "The shaft," Ashford gasps. "There." Hayes sees it now. The tunnel ends in a small chamber, maybe 15 feet across. In the center, a vertical shaft rises into darkness. Metal rungs are bolted into the stone wall, forming a crude ladder. The grey glow is daylight, filtering down from somewhere high above. Reeves reaches the shaft first. He looks up, shining his flashlight into the gloom. The beam barely reaches halfway, before fading into shadow. "Jesus, that's got to be 200 feet. 230, Ashford confirms. Give or take. Hayes does the math. 230 feet of vertical climb, with Cole injured, with Germans right behind them, with no way to defend themselves once they're on the ladder. Bishop voices what everyone's thinking. "We'll never make it. They'll pick us off like ducks in a shooting gallery. Then we hold them here." Hayes turns back to the tunnel entrance. The chamber is small but defensible. The tunnel opening is the only way in. If they can hold that choke point, they can buy time for the others to climb. "Reeves, Lawson, start climbing. Get Cole up first. Bishop, you're next. Get that evidence to the top." Bishop hesitates. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. Sergeant." That's an order. Bishop's jaw tightens, but he nods. He helps Cole to the ladder, and the injured private begins the agonizing climb, one rung at a time. Lawson follows close behind, ready to catch him if he falls. Reeves is already halfway up the first section. Hayes turns to Ashford. "Can you climb with your hands tied?" "I'll have to." Hayes pulls out his knife. For a moment their eyes meet. Then Hayes cuts the rope binding Ashford's wrists. The general flexes his fingers, wincing as blood flows back into them. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Climb." Ashford moves to the ladder and starts up. Hayes watches him for a moment, making sure he's stable, then turns back to the tunnel. He can see flashlight beams now bobbing in the darkness. The Germans are close, maybe 50 yards, maybe less. He pulls a grenade from his belt. Standard issue fragmentation, 4-second fuse. He's been carrying it since Normandy, waiting for the right moment to use it. This seems like the right moment. The first German rounds the corner. Hayes sees the silhouette, the shape of the helmet, the rifle coming up. He pulls the pin, counts to 2, and throws. The grenade arcs through the air and lands exactly where Hayes aimed it, right at the tunnel bend. The Germans see it. One of them screams a warning. They try to retreat, but they're packed too tight, moving too fast. The explosion is massive in the confined space. The tunnel amplifies it, turning it into a physical force that slams into Hayes like a wall. He feels the pressure wave hit his chest, his ears, his eyes. The sound is beyond sound, a roar that obliterates everything else. When the dust clears, the tunnel entrance is partially collapsed. Stones and debris block most of the opening. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to slow them down. Enough to buy time. Hayes's ears are ringing. He can barely hear his own breathing. He turns to the shaft and looks up. His squad is climbing, dark shapes against the grey light. They're maybe a third of the way up. He starts climbing. The rungs are cold against his palms, slick with moisture. His rifle hangs across his back, pulling at his shoulders. Every muscle in his body is screaming, but he forces himself to keep moving. One rung, then another, then another. Below him, he hears sounds, muffled by the ringing in his ears, but unmistakable. The Germans are clearing the rubble. They're coming. Hayes climbs faster. His hands are cramping. His shoulders burn. Sweat drips into his eyes. He doesn't look down, doesn't look up, just focuses on the next rung, the next grip, the next pull. A gunshot echoes up the shaft, then another. The Germans have reached the chamber below. They're firing blind, aiming up into the darkness. A bullet ricochets off stone somewhere to Hayes's right. Another sparks off a metal rung 10 feet below him. Above, someone shouts. Hayes looks up and sees Reeves at the top of the shaft, silhouetted against daylight. The corporal is waving, urging them to move faster. Cole is there too, being hauled over the edge by Lawson. They made it. They're out. Hayes keeps climbing. His arms feel like dead weight. Every breath is a fight. The rifle on his back might as well be made of lead. Another gunshot from below. This one close enough that Hayes feels the bullet pass by his leg, so close it tugs at his pant leg. He doesn't stop, doesn't slow, just climbs. He's 20 feet from the top when he sees Ashford struggling. The general is just above him, moving slowly, his hands shaking on the rungs. He's reached his limit. Hayes can see it in the way he's moving, in the way his whole body is trembling. Keep going. Ashford looks down. His face is grey, his eyes glassy with exhaustion. I can't. You can. 10 more rungs. I'm done. You're not done until I say you're done. Move. Ashford closes his eyes, takes a breath and climbs. 1 rung, 2, 3. Hayes climbs right behind him, close enough to catch him if he falls. Below, more gunfire echoes up the shaft. The Germans are climbing now too. Hayes can hear them on the ladder, their boots ringing against metal. 5 rungs from the top, Ashford's hand slips. He falls backward, his fingers losing their grip. Hayes lunges upward and catches the general's wrist. For a moment they hang there, Ashford dangling, Hayes holding him with one hand while clinging to the ladder with the other. I've got you. Hayes hauls Ashford up. The general finds his footing, grabs the rungs again. Together they climb the final distance. Hands reach down from above, Bishop and Reeves grabbing Ashford's arms and pulling him over the edge, then Hayes, his muscles giving out as soon as he's clear of the shaft. He collapses onto frozen ground, his chest heaving, his vision swimming. Cold air hits his face, he's outside. They made it. Bishop is already moving, positioning the squad in a defensive perimeter around the shaft opening. Below they can hear the Germans still climbing, getting closer. Hayes forces himself to his feet. His legs barely hold him. He looks around, taking in their surroundings. They're on a hillside, surrounded by pine trees. Snow covers everything. The shaft opening is a dark hole in the ground, partially hidden by brush and snow. And standing at the edge of the trees, 50 yards away, is a line of American soldiers, a dozen of them. Rifles raised, pointed directly at Hayes and his squad. An officer steps forward, captain's bars on his collar. His face is hard, his voice harder. Sergeant Hayes, you and your men are under arrest. Hayes raises his hands slowly. His squad follows his lead, rifles lowering, palms showing empty. The American captain keeps his weapon trained on them as he approaches, his boots crunching through the snow. Behind him, his soldiers maintain their positions, creating a firing line with no gaps. The captain stops 10 feet away. His uniform is clean, too clean for someone who's been in the field. His face is young, but his eyes are cold. When he speaks, his voice carries the flat authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Drop your weapons. Hayes doesn't move. Captain, we're American soldiers. We just escaped from a German facility. I know exactly who you are, Sergeant, and I know exactly what facility you came from. Now drop your weapons, or I will order my men to fire. Bishop steps forward, his voice tight with anger. You're threatening to shoot your own men. I'm securing potential security threats. There's a difference. Hayes feels the situation sliding out of control. His squad is exhausted, outnumbered, and surrounded. Cole is barely standing, blood still seeping through the bandage on his leg. Fighting their way out isn't an option. He makes the call. Do what he says. Weapons down. The squad complies reluctantly. Rifles hit the snow. Sidearms follow. The captain gestures and his soldiers move forward to collect the weapons. One of them spots the leather satchel still strapped across Ashford's shoulder. He reaches for it. Ashford steps back. That satchel contains classified intelligence. It needs to reach command immediately. The captain's expression doesn't change. Everything you're carrying is now evidence in a court-martial proceeding, including that satchel. Court-martial? On what grounds? Unauthorized penetration of restricted territory, engagement with enemy forces without orders, kidnapping a superior officer. The captain's eyes move to Hayes. And suspected collaboration with enemy combatants. The word collaboration hits like a physical blow. Hayes feels his squad tense around him. Reeves takes a step forward, his fists clenched. That's insane. We found the general in that factory. He was helping the Germans. According to whom? You? The captain shakes his head. General Ashford was conducting a classified intelligence operation. You compromised that operation and potentially exposed him to enemy retaliation. Hayes feels the pieces starting to fall into place. The captain's clean uniform, his men positioned perfectly, as if they'd been waiting. The timing too precise to be coincidence. You knew we were coming. The captain doesn't answer, which is answer enough. Ashford speaks up, his voice calm, but carrying an edge of steel. Captain, what's your name? Captain Richard Stanton. Who's your commanding officer, Captain Stanton? That's classified. Is it Colonel William Brenner? Stanton's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. It's only for a second, but it's enough. Ashford nods slowly. I thought so. Tell me, Captain, did Colonel Brenner order you to secure this position? Did he tell you exactly when we'd be coming out of that shaft? General, I'm not at liberty to discuss operational details. Of course you're not. Ashford turns to Hayes. Brenner's name is in the satchel. He's one of them, part of the network. Stanton's hand moves to his sidearm. General, I'm ordering you to stop talking. Or what? You'll shoot me. In front of witnesses. Ashford's voice rises, carrying across the clearing. You want to arrest Sergeant Hayes for kidnapping a superior officer? Fine. But that means you have to take me into custody too. That means I get to file a report. That means the satchel goes to military intelligence for review. Is that really what Colonel Brenner wants? The captain's hand hovers near his weapon. For a long moment, nobody moves. The only sound is wind through the pine trees and the distant crack of branches breaking under ice. Then, from the shaft behind them, voices echo up. German voices. The soldiers climbing the ladder have reached the top. They're seconds away from emerging. Stanton makes his decision. Fall back. Into the trees. Now. His soldiers retreat quickly, taking up new positions behind cover. Hayes' squad follows, moving away from the shaft opening. They're barely concealed when the first German soldier pulls himself out of the hole, his rifle sweeping the area. Another follows, then another. Within 30 seconds, there are 8 of them, forming a defensive perimeter, weapons ready. Hayes watches from behind a fallen log, 20 yards away. The Germans are scanning the forest, looking for tracks in the snow. One of them spots the American footprints leading away from the shaft. He calls out to the others, pointing. Stanton's voice comes from Hayes' left, barely a whisper. Hold fire, let them come. The Germans advance cautiously, following the tracks. They're spread out in a tactical formation, covering each other as they move through the trees. Professional soldiers. They know what they're doing. When they're 15 yards away, Stanton gives the order. Fire! The forest erupts. Rifles crack from a dozen positions simultaneously. The Germans don't stand a chance. Half of them drop in the first volley. The others try to return fire, but they don't know where the shots are coming from. They're caught in a kill zone with nowhere to hide. It's over in 20 seconds. 8 bodies in the snow. Silence returns to the forest, broken only by the ringing in Hayes' ears. Stanton rises from his position and walks toward the shaft opening. He pulls a grenade from his belt, arms it, and drops it down the hole. 5 seconds later, a muffled explosion echoes up from below. He drops another grenade, then another. That'll collapse the tunnel, he says to no one in particular. Buy us some time. Hayes stands slowly, his hands still visible. Stanton turns to face him. Here's what's going to happen, Sergeant. You and your squad are going to accompany us back to base. General Ashford will be debriefed. The contents of that satchel will be reviewed by the appropriate authorities. And if everything checks out, you'll be returned to your unit with a commendation for rescuing a superior officer from enemy territory. And if it doesn't check out, then you'll face charges for the actions you took today. Ashford steps forward, the satchel clutched against his chest. The satchel goes directly to General Eisenhower's staff, not to Colonel Brenner, not to anyone in the supply chain, directly to Eisenhower. Stanton's expression hardens. That's not your decision to make. Actually, it is. I still outrank you, Captain, and unless you plan to shoot me right here, I'm giving you a direct order. The satchel goes to Eisenhower. For a moment, Hayes thinks Stanton might actually do it, might actually pull his weapon and shoot a one-star general in cold blood. But instead, the captain takes a breath and nods. As you wish, sir. They march through the forest for 3 hours. The snow gets deeper. The temperature drops. Cole struggles but refuses help, limping along on his wounded leg with Bishop staying close in case he falls. No one speaks. The only sounds are boots in snow and labored breathing. As they walk, Hayes thinks about everything that's happened. The factory, the kill list, Ashford's story about a conspiracy. It all sounds insane, but the filing cabinets were real, the names in those folders were real, and Captain Stanton's reaction to Colonel Brenner's name was real too. They reach the American lines just after dark. A forward operating base dug into a hillside surrounded by barbed wire and sandbags. Hayes and his squad are separated immediately, taken to different tents, questioned individually. Hayes sits across from a major he's never seen before. The questions come rapid fire. What were you doing in that sector? Who gave you orders to enter the facility? What did you see inside? What did General Ashford tell you? Hayes answers truthfully. All of it. The major writes everything down without comment, his face unreadable. When the questioning finally ends, Hayes is taken to a holding tent. His squad is already there, sitting on cots, looking exhausted. Cole's leg has been properly bandaged. Someone brought them food. Real food, hot and fresh. Bishop looks up when Hayes enters. They take your statement. Yeah. What do you think happens now? Hayes sits down on an empty cot and rubs his face with both hands. I don't know. 3 days pass. They're not prisoners exactly, but they're not free either. They're confined to the base under guard, waiting. Rumors circulate. Some say Ashford's been arrested. Others say he's been flown to London. Nobody knows anything for certain. On the 4th day, Hayes is summoned to the command tent. He enters expecting another interrogation. Instead, he finds General Ashford sitting at a field desk, clean uniform, freshly shaved. He looks 10 years younger than he did in that factory. Sit down, Sergeant. Hayes sits. Ashford studies him for a long moment before speaking. The satchel made it to Eisenhower. The contents are being reviewed by military intelligence. Several officers have been quietly relieved of duty pending investigation. Colonel Brenner among them. What about the factory? Bombed 2 days ago. 8th Air Force dropped 20 tons of ordnance on those coordinates. Nothing left but a crater. Hayes nods slowly. It's done then. Whatever was happening there, it's finished. The kill list, being cross-referenced. We're identifying everyone who might be at risk, providing security where needed. It's going to take months to untangle all of it. Ashford leans back in his chair. You did good work, Sergeant. You and your men. You saved my life. More than that, you potentially saved hundreds of others. I was just doing my job. No, you weren't. Your job was to conduct a recon patrol and report back. Instead, you followed your instincts. You took a risk, you made a choice. Ashford pulls a folder from his desk and slides it across to Hayes. This is your commendation, Silver Star. Your entire squad is getting them. Hayes opens the folder. The citation is typed neatly on official letterhead. He reads it twice, but the words don't really register. What was really happening in that factory, sir? Ashford takes a breath. Exactly what I told you. There's a network of people, civilians mostly, who've been profiting from this war, selling materials to both sides, arranging production deals. They don't care who wins. They just want the fighting to continue as long as possible, because that's when they make the most money. He pauses. I was sent to investigate deep cover. The factory was one of several facilities they're operating. I spent 3 months gathering evidence. Then you and your squad showed up. You really wanted to be found. I really did. I couldn't extract on my own. Too much security. Too many eyes watching. I needed someone from the outside to force the issue. Ashford almost smiles. I just didn't expect it to be a sergeant and 7 infantrymen. Hayes looks down at the commendation in his hands. Silver Star. The 3rd highest decoration for valor. It should feel like an honor. Instead, it just feels heavy. What happens to us now? You go back to your unit. You continue the mission. You don't talk about what you saw in that factory. Not to anyone, not ever. Ashford's voice drops. That's an order, Sergeant. For your own protection as much as anything else. Hayes understands. There are people still out there. People connected to that network. People who won't be happy that the factory was destroyed and the evidence was recovered. People with long memories. Yes, sir. Dismissed. Hayes stands, salutes, and turns to leave. He's at the tent flap when Ashford speaks again. "Sergeant Hayes." "Sir?" "Thank you. For trusting me, for believing me. I know it wasn't easy." Hayes looks back at the general, at this man who orchestrated an elaborate rescue operation, who risked everything to expose a conspiracy, who trusted a squad of soldiers he'd never met to do the impossible. "You would have done the same, sir." "I hope I would have, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out." Hayes steps out into the cold morning air. His squad is waiting by the transport trucks, gear packed, ready to move out. They're going back to the war, back to the fighting, back to the mud and the snow and the fear. Bishop sees him coming and straightens up. "We good?" Hayes nods. "We're good." They climb into the truck. As it pulls away from the base, Hayes looks back one last time. The command tent is already being dismantled. Ashford will be gone by nightfall, back to wherever generals go when their operations end. And the factory in the forest will become just another crater in a landscape full of craters. But Hayes knows the truth now. He knows that war isn't just about countries and armies and flags. It's about choices. It's about moments where you have to decide what matters more, following orders or following your conscience. And sometimes, when you're lucky, those two things align. The truck rounds a bend, and the base disappears behind the trees. Cole shifts on the bench across from Hayes, trying to find a comfortable position for his injured leg. "Think we'll ever talk about what happened?" Hayes shakes his head. "No. Good," Cole says. "I don't think I'd believe it anyway." The squad falls silent. The truck bounces along the rutted road, carrying them back toward the sound of distant artillery, back toward their war. And as the forest closes in around them, Hayes reaches into his pocket and touches the folded commendation. He'll keep it. He'll remember. But he won't forget the real reason they went into that factory, not for medals, not for glory, but because when they saw something wrong, they chose to do something about it. And in a war where so much is out of their control, that choice mattered. That choice will always matter.